When the sirens sound and the stakes are high, what actually happens behind the scenes? Emergency management isn't just about the crisis, it's about the community we build before the storm hits. Every episode, we explore local emergencies as well as national, dissecting the logistics of emergency response and sharing practical tips to help you stay prepared. Whether you're a first responder or a resident looking to sharpen your safety plan, you're in the right place. We're pulling back on the curtain on the world of disaster response, from breaking down how we handle large-scale local events to giving you the insider tools you need to protect your home and family. We're here to make sure you're ready for whatever comes next. Thanks for joining us. Now grab your kits, stay informed, and let's go on scene. Welcome to On Scene with Emergency Management, the official podcast of Franklin County Emergency Management. I'm your host, James Hicks, Public Information Officer, and I'm joined as always by Franklin County Emergency Management Director, Nicholas Thorpe. How are you doing today, Nicholas?
Doing well. Thank you for having me back, and this will be fun.
And what are we going to talk about today?
We're going to talk a little bit about some incidences that have happened recently, and then we're going to dive into what it means for how emergency management plans for large-scale special events in the county.
Okay.
We're watching or seeing how, as the county grows, the small little community events that made Franklin County so charming are now becoming large mass gatherings, and with that comes more planning. So we're going to dive into more details about that.
Okay, so let's start off with some things that have happened just recently. What's been going on in the county that you've been going out to?
So one of the, I guess the biggest thing that's happened so far is we had a skydiving incident here in the county. Luckily, both individuals that were involved with that one person suffered some moderate injuries, but they should be able to recover fully, and the other person was unharmed at all. But the complexity of it was what made it an interesting response for the county.
Yeah, and what happened to that particular skydiver?
So we had skydivers that jumped over a weekend, and they took off, and it was a sunny day. And by the time they jumped out of the airplane and were falling, we had a cold front move in with gusts of wind up to about 30, 40 miles an hour, and it blew them off course. So one diver actually came in a little harder than probably anticipated, and he suffered some injuries. The other one got blown completely off course and landed in a tree about 80 feet in the air. Now, he was unharmed, but still being up in a tree 80 feet is not where a skydiver wants to be, and it's hard to get down from a tree that tall. Of course, this was towards the evening. We had a lot of rain, and it was a large tree. So it took an entire community effort to get him down.
So does somebody come out there with an 80-foot ladder and climb up the tree, or how did you get him out?
Almost is exactly what we had to do. The tree, he came down on a private property in a wooded area off a creek, and in the response efforts, they brought out a ladder truck. Lewisburg Fire Department brought their ladder truck, saying if they could just pluck him out of the tree with the ladder truck. But what they learned is that when they tried to put the stabilizers down to prevent the truck from wobbling and everything, the path that they were on was too narrow, and the ground was too saturated.
Yeah.
So that wasn't an option. So then you have to think, how do you get a guy out of the tree? So we pulled some ladders off the truck and secured them, and even those ladders were still too short. So after a bunch of safety rigging of ropes and knots and everything that fire departments do, we actually brought in a private tree climber that is known to the fire department, and he was able to climb about 40 feet or so from the top of the ladder to the individual to help him get harnessed up and secure all the ropes so he could be lowered down safely. But it took us about 2 hours to figure that out. Again, in the rain, in the dark. So it was. We're grateful that he was able to walk away from it, but definitely an eye-opening experience for all the fire departments involved.
Yeah, and it's good to hear that he obviously made it by without any major injuries as well.
It goes to show that just because it's a sunny day right now doesn't mean that things don't go sideways at a moment's notice. And
yeah,
that's where preparedness comes in.
And you brought up something too, and I remember because I had to learn a whole lot about weather when I took the test to be able to operate a drone commercially, is about cold fronts. Is you can be a warm day, and then all of a sudden it gets kind of cold, and you go, uh-oh. Now I start to think, uh-oh, there might be a storm about to brew because that cold front's coming in and the way it mixes and all that. I know you're not a meteorologist, but I don't know if you want to take a stab at what actually happens there.
Right, so when that cold front moves in, it's pushing that cold air and pushing that warm air out of the way. And so that's why you'll actually feel. People will say they feel the storm coming, the creaks in their hands and arthritis and everything. That's where that plays due to it. The pressure in the atmosphere changes. It could be 80, 90 degrees with a lot of humidity, and all of a sudden just drops. The temperature drops. And then that's sort of the first indication that, the weather's changing, and you probably should be more aware of the weather conditions, but that's your first indication of, I need to really start paying attention of what's happening around me, because you go from a nice sunny warm day to 40 mile per hour straight line winds that are blowing trees down and power lines down.
Yeah.
It really does happen at a moment's notice.
Yeah. So you've also been involved in any other incidents or community events up to this point?
We had Special Olympics recently here in the county. It's a great organization. We were able to partner with Parks and Recs and Franklin County EMS, and to provide just some more comfort care with the mobile response trailer that we have. We were out there providing a safe and climate-controlled area for the athletes if they needed it. Right now, we just have so many more events coming than what we've done. As spring approaches and we get out of winter and everything, it's special event season.
Yeah. So walk everybody through. I know I participate. It's not like when we go into these events that we're day of event going, okay, we need to do something, and it's more than just how is the event going to be marketed and what are the things in there. There's a whole public safety planning aspect to these larger events. So walk us through kind of the process of that.
And that's what we focus on, is the public safety side. We take the assumption that the event planners are doing the marketing during the vendor intake and everything to make the event fun. It's our job to help make sure that the event is safe. And so we look at how large is the event going to be. Usually 500 or more expected participants gets our attention, and we're like, okay, what are the safety plans around this? What do we need to leverage? For example, we have Flying G Rodeo event coming up in June 2026, and we got Airfest coming up in June, and then America 250 in July. All these events are expected to bring thousands of people to the county. And so with that, we have to bring the collaborative effort of all our emergency service partners together to discuss who, what, when, where, why, and how, and what resources are needed to ensure that we're providing a safe environment. So that brings risk management from the county, EMS, local fire department, sheriff's office, local municipal police departments if necessary. For the Airfest event, we have to bring in the FAA, and we have to do essentially a full-scale exercise prior to that event. So each event has its little nuances as what it means for public safety, and we have to get everyone around the table to have that discussion about how can we make the scene safe, how many people and responders do we need on scene during that event, and that takes time and effort.
Yeah, and I know these planning meetings sometimes we do them sometimes a month out or sometimes months out just to start. I know with Airfest we started, I want to say our first meeting was in early April for the June event, and we're going to have a couple more meetings along the way. So, and
I think that's something that people don't realize, is that it's not just one meeting and we're done. It's where I have an initial meeting, we have a mid-planning meeting, and then we have a final planning meeting. And during that process, we're learning more information about how that event is evolving, how that event is growing, and how emergency services and emergency management are going to help facilitate the public safety response, if you will, to that incident. And then within all that, we're documenting a lot of things. Not only who's attending these meetings, but we're helping in the development of an incident action plan, which is sort of like your movie script of how emergencies are going to be handled or how public safety is going to be handled at these events. And it's one of those things that emergency management does well, is planning. So each of these events will have a specific incident action plan that tells first responders who, what, when, where, why, and how of providing a safe environment at these events.
Yep. So when you go into the planning of this in the meeting, what are the questions that you're asking, either the planners or other public safety partners, to get a sense to build this incident action plan?
Right. So one of our first questions is how many people are involved and beyond the logistics of it, who, what, when, where, why of the event. Then it's how many people are coming, and then we start looking at what are some of the expected risks and hazards. So if we're talking about a rodeo, people getting thrown from horses and bulls and slip, trips, and falls. Airfest, we're talking about aviation incidents or, again, slip, trips, and falls and security issues like that. And heat related, weather, of course. No, thank you for that. And so we start looking at that and say, okay, how can we mitigate these likely things to happen? If it's a really hot day, what do we need to bring to make sure that there's climate-controlled environments, whether it's partnering with our friends with Capital Regional Advisory Committee's Healthcare Preparedness Coalition, or CAPRAC. They have a lot of resources that help us provide a more climate-controlled environment. To if it's 4th of July and we're thinking it's a security, there's more of a security risk there with as many people, bringing in more law enforcement. So we have to do that threat assessment, if you will, of what are the likely hazards, and then what resources do we have in the county to meet those, to mitigate those events from occurring. So can't really prevent people from slip, trip, and falling, but we know that's an issue. We can make sure that we have extra bandages on hand for when those things happen.
Yeah, and the goal is overall to make sure that people who are attending the event can do it, have fun, and do it in a safe manner. So
our goal is for you not to see us, right? We want you to be confident when you come out to these events, knowing that there's been months of planning. There's tens, 20s, hundreds of people that have come together to help work to make sure that these events are safe. And if you don't ever see the medical UTV drive out and pick someone up, if you don't see a law enforcement interdicting in something that might be suspicious, that's what we're going for. We don't want you to see us. We want you to know we're there, but we're not going to get in the way of you having a good time either.
Yeah, and every type of event can be different. So Airfest, it's kind of it's not necessarily a big of a traffic thing. It's like when we do the 4th of July fireworks with Parks and Rec for America 250. That's when there's traffic patterns and parking and some things like that have to be, so it's like each planning meeting has different elements to it that you have to bring in. It's like, are we packing a lot of people in this area, and how are we going to handle that versus, just providing an open area.
Each event is unique in itself and how it's planning to entertain individuals. And no matter how often an event occurs, for years we had the Balloon Festival, but we approached each Balloon Festival, we're approaching each Airfest event or each rodeo event or fireworks event that happens in the county. Those things happen on an annual basis. We approach those as if they're brand new to us. We have some institutional knowledge, we know all the people in the room, that's great, that helps in the planning process. But just because something did or didn't happen one year doesn't mean it's not or it will happen the next year. And so we have to take a fresh approach every time for every event. And we're asking some of the same questions over and over again, but each event is different, no matter what the schedule is for those events.
And to give people a sense of, I guess, getting into the weeds of planning this, so we have our meetings and stuff like that, and then you take all this information back, and you talk about an incident action plan, or IAP as we'll refer to it as. That's not you on a Word document just typing a bunch of paragraphs. There's actually forms that are built that everybody uses because it's a standardized system. ICS forms, Incident Command System forms that go into that. So not getting too far into the weeds for those who may not want to know the finer points of incident management teams and things like that. But what's in that IAP from a documentation standpoint?
Right. So from a FEMA perspective and fire, wildland fire operations, there have been created these forms that pretty much tell us or allow us to fill in the blanks of how to organize public safety in responding to incidents, emergencies, disasters, but also help us organize ourselves so that we can provide a safe environment. So it will delineate who's in charge, who's responsible for moving people around and actually doing the first responding, who's responsible for looking at the bigger picture and tracking all the resources we're using, who's responsible for tracking all the costs associated with everything. So it helps delineate authority so everyone knows who they are answering to. ICS, big factor of ICS is making sure everyone is only answering to one supervisor. So we write all that down and provide direct instructions to what the expectations of law enforcement are in this space. what are the expectations of EMS, what are the expectations of EM, and they each have their own form that says who their boss is, who they contact if they need to ask a question or need resources, and what their job responsibilities are, and what their risks are. If you're doing traffic management, you have to have a vest on. There's going to be a lot of people. Don't walk in front of airplanes. Don't go where the animals are at the rodeo. So we provide specific instructions on how to keep first responders safe as well. And that's what IAPs do. They help keep us safe, and they help us do our job better.
Okay. And at the risk of losing any more people to saying this is getting too far in the weeds, part of this, there are prescribed roles that we typically fall into within ICS structure with incident commander, command staff, and general staff. So on a high level, kind of go through those positions for people who are more interested.
Right. So if you're not to bore people, but let's get into the weeds. So we have a command staff, which is an instant commander, liaison officer. So instant commander responsible for everything that's happening. Your liaisons, making sure all your outside resources can come and play in the sandbox, is what we like to say. Your public information officer, James, you're very familiar with that. And how do we do internal communications, external communications? Your safety officer, making sure that all the operations that are occurring in the site are safe, not only from a first responder's perspective, but also from a participant perspective. And that's
command staff.
That's your command staff. And then we have what we call the general staff, and that's your operations section, boots on the ground, planning, your thinkers, and looking at what could happen and looking into the future, if you will. Your logistics folks, making sure that operations and everyone has everything that they need to do the jobs that they need to do, and also taking care of the first responders. And then finance. How are we paying for all this? How are we processing claims and tracking time for everyone on scene? So again, it's assigning specific roles to specific individuals to make sure we're organized so that we're not duplicating efforts, we're not duplicating resource ordering, we're using the county's money wisely, and how we are providing a safe environment during these events. I would like. Can I just add one more thing?
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons we wanted to talk about this is ICS and event planning is not just for first responders. I know a lot of people that use these types of concepts in planning Thanksgiving Day meals, Christmas, birthday parties, and I think it's one of those applicable things that you can look at what first responders are doing and apply it to your everyday life.
Yeah, private sector can use these just as well as government entities. And the purpose of all of this was to create a uniform guidance so that if it's if it's obviously a pre-planned event or if it's some sort of emergency event, that people showing up on scene have been trained through this. They know if they're going to fulfill a role, what they're supposed to do, and then and everybody knows how it goes. Everybody knows that you report to the incident commander, or if you're in operations, you're reporting to the ops section chief or whatever.
Yeah, following 9/11, with the adoption of the National Incident Management System and everything, the President George W. Bush at the time wanted to ensure that there was a standard for how we respond to emergencies and disasters. Now, this system's been in place for decades. It dates back even further than just wildfires in California. I mean, the military's been using the same kind of concept, and business has been using the same kind of concepts for years. But now it's a standard that all first responders are going to follow. If you're an instant commander in Franklin County, there's an instant commander in Robeson County. So if someone calls me up and says, I need a PIO, I need a planning section chief or something like that, what we're doing here is what they're doing as well. It's easy to plug in people from all walks of life.
Yeah, and take a different angle to some of this too, is there is a whole process built into state emergency managements and especially here in North Carolina, whereby you can go through credentialing for these specific positions. And I know we have people in the county working toward that. I know I'm working toward that on the PIO side. But that also gives you two things. One, if we have a neighbor in need and we need to, if they say, hey, we absolutely could use a credentialed PIO, well, we might have one that we could send or something like that. Or the same with various other positions through there. I know there's been events where they go, we just need a planning section chief or situation unit leader or something like that. And if they get a credential, they want to have somebody to come in, plug in with those teams and everything. So that's kind of a thing that we don't talk about as much. I know with Hurricane Helene, there was a push to, if we have credentialed people out there, and I think that sort of gave an opportunity for people to look at it and go, wow, we need to build these rosters up of credentialed people just in case we ever need it for that. That's the, helping others. And I think there's also a concept going on in local jurisdictions to say, hey, let's get our people credentialed so we have our own internal team. So when we have a disaster pre-planned event, if I can say that word, you can already have your incident management team that already works well together. You call them up, they go and they do what they need to do. And it's not sort of a, everybody, we work pretty well together in anyway, but if you already have that rostered, it sort of cuts out a little bit of.
Yeah, I think one of our goals here in Franklin County in emergency management is we want to have a credentialed incident management team so that no matter where the incident is or emergency is in Franklin County, I can flip a switch and I know I'm getting individuals who have met a statewide and national standard for performing the duties of specific positions, as we talked about, incident commander, plan section chief, operations section chief, and stuff like that. But it also, I think, speaks to the professionalism of where we're trying to take emergency management here in the county, and or emergency response and planning, is trying to build up more state, nationally credentialed individuals in these specific roles, or in multiple roles even, so that the service that we're providing to the community is coming from a perspective and or is coming from an area where people have trained 50, 60, 70 hours in these roles to perform duties, and then they've also have experience working actual events in those roles, so that when the big thing happens in Franklin County, that your responders that are coming to help and organize and manage the incidents have the experience, have the training, and are blessed, if you will, by the state or national partners to do the jobs that they're doing. Yeah. I mean, I can tell you I have 200,000, whatever, hundreds and thousands of hours of training, which is great, which allows me to do my role and do it professionally. But if I tell you, hey, I'm a nationally credentialed incident commander, that comes with, FEMA certification and qualifications that says, oh, I can perform these jobs without a shadow of a doubt.
Yeah, and people know that when you show up, you're going to know exactly what you need to do or the resources that you need. And that process is kind of interesting. You take there's a different set of courses. You take a position-specific course, an all-hazards position-specific course, and then you take a incident management team course, and then you get to open a task book and then get to be evaluated in real life, applying those skills before you become a credentialed officer. So, no, there's a way far down the rabbit hole into the weeds, but some people might be interested in that, and that's something we don't talk about, the information out there. A lot of times you have to go and ask somebody because there's just not a super great resource for understanding the process. So it's good to shine a light on that.
Right, and our first responders have the same thing as well. Not everyone can just walk in and do an application to become a police officer or a firefighter. There's hundreds and hundreds of hours of training that go into becoming a certified firefighter or a certified law enforcement officer. This is what we have in emergency management, are these job-specific credentials that allow us to do what we want. Now, there are certification bodies. I'm a certified emergency manager with the International Association of Emergency Managers, which says I'm qualified and blessed to do emergency management work based on a whole set of standards that they have. The task books and the specific job-specific areas. It's just a way to further credential us and knowing how to do our jobs.
Yep. And we talk about all these systems and things like that. Every incident doesn't have to have every player. It's scalable. You might just have a couple of people fill out roles. Sometimes you don't need logistics or things like that. So it's something that you can kind of make it work the way you need it to work to do that, but you have those resources in place.
So let's turn this conversation over to how's this applicable to our listeners, who might not be first responders, right? Yeah. So when we talk about emergency preparedness, we talk about knowing when emergencies happen, right? Having a plan for what you're going to do when they happen, and then having a kit to help sustain yourself when they happen, right? So we're talking a lot about planning today, right? So when we look at, or when we say have a plan, it's not just have an evacuation plan from your home, school, work, where you're going to go if you can't go to any of those places or have to leave those places. Having a contact list for who you're going to call. If cell phone towers are down here, it's easier to call someone outside of the area, right? But now, who's responsible for what, right? If you have a large family or even a small family, like who's responsible for getting the dog or the cat or the pet? Who's responsible for making contact with outside members? Who's responsible for picking up the kits or driving the vehicle or to the rendezvous point where everyone's going to gather? And that's what incident management planning is now you're assigning roles and responsibilities. So it's not just me as an individual head of my household. I'm responsible for all this responsibilities. I have to delegate some of these responsibilities to somebody. So while I'm putting together emergency kits, snack bags, getting ready to run out the door, maybe my kid can help wrangle a pet. Maybe another kid can wrangle clothes for everybody, and have all the car doors open. So now everyone's moving and working in the same direction to get us to safety. Yep. People use this incident management system and IEPs and planning process for special events. I had a boss in Boston who said, he would essentially write an incident action plan for Thanksgiving. Who's bringing the napkins? Who's responsible for doing the cooking? Who's bringing drinks? Who's responsible for tablecloths? And who's bringing tables and extra chairs? Mm-hmm. So instead of your poor mother having to worry about all of it, now the entire family has ownership into the event, and maybe take a little bit more pride in how it comes out in a positive light. We had a great Thanksgiving Day meal because we all contributed to it. It wasn't just one person feeling that the weight of that event is just on them.
Yeah. Good analogy there, and a good practical application for just anybody out there, our listeners, whether they be just someone interested in emergencies or disasters or management of emergencies, incidents, and things like that. But also if we have firefighters, police officers listening to this and thinking, well, we do a little bit of this, I want to know a little bit more into that. Do we have something else you want to talk about?
I think we need to make sure that we are staying on top of our surroundings, maintaining situational awareness, right? Nothing you can do about the weather when you're falling out of an airplane, right? Mm-hmm. But I think it goes to show that things can change at a moment's notice. Car wrecks, bad things happen, and the more situational aware we are, and the more we practice what our response should be to these, that's going to put us in a better position to make a better decision that's going to keep us safe. I like to say we don't want you scared. We want you prepared, right? Mm-hmm. So don't be blind to your surroundings. Make sure you're keeping up to date with weather and traffic and special events that are happening. 4th of July, there's going to be road closures. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to be driving around that time frame, expect those road closures. Don't be surprised by what's happening in the community. The community is a very active community in Franklin County. There's always something, good and maybe troublesome happening, but that's the life of any growing and any anywhere is going to be that way. So making sure you know how to get around traffic incidents, knowing how you get around roadblocks because of special events. But when you go to these special events, knowing that there is a complete network of first responders and emergency managers that are working to try and make that as safe of an environment as possible while ensuring that you're having as much fun there as well.
All right, that's it for today's episode of On Scene with Emergency Management. We hope these insights give you a better look at the work happening right here in Franklin County, and more importantly, help you be more prepared for the unexpected. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe and share it with your neighbor. If an emergency happened in Franklin County right now, would you get the notification? Don't leave it to chance. Head on over to franklincountync.gov/emergency alerts and sign up for our emergency alert system. It's the fastest way to get life-saving information from weather warnings to road closures sent directly to your phone. It takes minutes to sign up, but it could make all the difference when seconds count. Check the show notes for the link. Remember, a prepared community starts with a prepared you. Until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and we'll see you back on Scene soon.